Hello everyone. I'm very happy to have here online with me Alice. Alice is a friend of mine and someone that I met through the EU Climate Pact. Last year we met in Brussels, where she brought a very interesting game, and I even got somewhere her sticker that remained with me, which only comes to prove the importance of having something tangible. So before we jump into the conversation, I would like to present to you Alice in a bit more details. She's a designer and foresighter and a university lecturer in circular economy, systems thinking and regeneration, with the objective to critically and creatively re-envision the fossil fuel-based linear world that we give and we live in for granted. She works with global organizations to make circularity a reality, mostly but not only in the public food sector with Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, FAO, the UN organization, and cities in the Mediterranean and MENA region. Since 2025, she coordinates the first Youth for Climate Assembly in the city of Milan, which I'm very interested to hear more. And she teaches systemic thinking and circular design at Politecnico di Milano School of Design and at Domus Academy. She advises climate tech startups and companies through Forest Valley, creator of the climate cards, which I mentioned previously, a deck of cards showcasing the climate impacts of food, ingredients, and common materials. Welcome, Alice. How are you feeling today?
Thank you. That was a long introduction, but thank you very much. I'm feeling great.
Yeah, it's a long introduction, but because there is a lot to say, I think, about you. When we had our initial conversation, there were so many pathways in which our conversation will go. So I'm just gonna see and ask you my regular first question. How come, what's your story, and how come you came to do the work that you do?
Okay, so I'm a designer by training. I studied product design and service design. And we had some introduction to sustainability in design school here in Milan, and then I studied in London, in Shanghai. But I felt like when we studied design, we studied the masters, the ones who made the history of design, and those they used to design objects because there was an opportunity post World War II in the years of the economic boom and in the years of plastic development to use plastic to give shape to objects that used to have a different shape because of different materials that we used to make this object with. So if you use wood for a cabinet, you cannot have the same rounded shapes that you would have with plastic, for example. So there were new markets, new materials, and new opportunities for expression, and that's when architects became designers as well. But this was not the case anymore for us because now we live in a world where we are so many, we have a lot of technologies, we can misuse a lot of technologies, we have lost touch with the natural world. So I feel like the work of the designer should be to be much more mindful about our impact on the materials that we choose, the technical process that we choose to transform things and objects into products, and also the life cycle of the products. Like the way you design it will determine whether it's reused, whether it's thrown away, and if yeah, anything basically, and the way the user use the product. So when I was in design, in service design in tech in Shanghai, I started working there. I came to this realization that designers should focus on circular economy, sustainability, because we have that process knowledge that allows us to be effective in this, and we also have decision making capability to bring these decisions into company, a city, wherever we work.
So it was through, let's say, a sustainability study that you had that somehow you started to recognize these limitations of how we have design in the past and how it can be, how it's limited actually in the now and in the future.
I
Yeah.
mean, it was not really through sustainability studies, but it was more while I was working in the tech sector in Shanghai, because
Mhm.
studying service design, you can study, for example, how a user uses a bike rental service or a online banking account or these kind of things. You understand what are the hiccups and the opportunities for the user to use in a service, and so how to improve it. And we were working on things like the first chatbots using AI. We were working on telecommunication, e-commerce for automotive sector. We were working on even food delivery apps. All these kind of things. And we were not thinking, we were only thinking about the user experience, but not the impact of all this evolving technology, on the waste management systems, on the cities, on the planet. And then I started, gradually thinking that maybe I should go back towards the supply chains, like studying the supply chains and understanding the materials and their impact and how to make supply chain circular. And that's when I decided to learn about the circular economy. I decided to learn about how sustainability can be integrated in the design practice through systemic thinking. So not only thinking with the user in your perspective, you're like not centering the user in your perspective, but putting the user as one of the objectives to serve, but also planet, city, business. Like it needs to be systemic interaction.
That makes sense. Are you familiar with the double materiality principle?
Yeah,
It
exactly. So
reminds me a bit of that, so that you're not only considering the impact, right? If
yes, the double materiality assessment is my last slide to convince designers that my method works, because I usually tell them, okay, you cannot only focus on the user, you have to focus on the planet and the city and this and that. And then in
yeah,
the end, I'm like, the motivation is the double materiality. Basically, if a company pollutes a planet or uses resources that are scarce, it will be impacted whenever there's something happening to the planet and vice versa. So it's really not a matter of being green, environmental, sustainable because we love it, but it's really a liability for your business and it's a liability for
yeah.
everybody, the community, for the planet.
Yeah, I was for my master thesis in that study I did in Sweden for strategic leadership towards sustainability. My master thesis was about CSRD, the Corporate Social Responsibility Directive, where the double materiality was introduced as like it was very like innovative. And now having the conversation with you makes me understand double materiality better, because it's in the context of systems thinking. You're just starting to considering
Yeah.
your company as one element of a much wider chain. And do you think, from your experience, do people understand you when you speak about these topics? Do you think there is a wider, I want to say, literacy, whether it's in companies or with university students, or do you think it's not, but it's becoming bigger? Like, what's your impression from working?
Um, I think they understand me because I use words like linear economy, that is the current economy, versus circular economy, or like recycling is not 100% circular economy, is one of the solutions, the least preferable solution besides dumping. And I use words like analytical thinking and systemic thinking. So I tend to create contrast between what we do and what we should do so that they understand where they stand. And if they're already using circular economy, if they're already using systemic thinking. And then I try to challenge the conversation, saying, for example, waste and pollution should be words that do not exist. Because if we design like nature designs, we wouldn't have waste and pollution. There would be somebody in charge to deal with it and make it a resource for something else. Or like the word externality, that is pollution by design. Externality is part of logical analytical thinking and not systemic thinking. So telling companies that they should be inserted in a wider system. The point, I think, um, it's not if they understand me. I think they do. The point is if how how relevant they think it is for them and how much agency they think they have to make a change, because it sounds always a bit daunting, to make such changes, to think systemically. And sometimes it's you come to think that, oh well, yeah, but I'm just one actor in like billions, and yeah, maybe I can do something about it, but maybe it's not my responsibility overall.
So would you say that the issue is kind of like of imagination, that almost it's hard to imagine, or what do you think are the main constraints that people have from what you've seen to
Yeah,
implement more this type of thinking and being?
mm-hmm. I think it is. So we don't like to change in general. Like for most of us, our work is not our call. It's something that enables us to do other things, whether I love skiing and I need money for skiing, or I want a family, or I want to focus on volunteering. But then, maybe I live in a territory where that's my only work available. And then I work on that because then I can do something else with my free time, knowing that I have financial security. So if work is not one of the pillars of your life. And I'm not saying you should leave to work, but you should decide, if you can, you could decide that the work you choose is something that um, aligns with your values, right? If that's not already the case, and that's totally fine, then you don't want to be enabler for change because it requires a lot of energy. Um, so you want things to be as they are, or you want somebody else to guide you in that change. We don't have an actor that stands between, the European Union, EU Green Deal directions and companies and tells them this is what you need to do, and this is how I will guide you to do it. We don't really have this kind of in-between enabler that leads the way for you. So companies need to do it themselves, but then companies are made of people, and people need to have the motivation. And and sometimes maybe it's one department following a direction, but the others are not. So it's really what we call in design wicked problems, no? That's the problems that are very hard to solve because you need a mix of tools, motivation, enablers, and so on and so forth.
It's interesting because my background is, besides international relations, is more in facilitation and training, and I see so many similarities between design, how you speak from design perspective, and how I would speak for a facilitation of a group or a process. But I think, I don't know, I'm starting to realize that facilitating and training is actually a part of the creatives. It's like
Yeah.
you're a creator. And I think that's also what a designer, almost when I'm hearing you speak, is like there's a whole army of people around the world which are tasked with the idea of creation. And then if they are not nested into the restrictions of what is possible on this planet, then we're going to spiral, which is basically what is happening. We're in a negative spiral in which we're using our resources, basically killing ourselves, our species, and others along the way. And yeah, that's. Am I hearing you correctly? What do you think about this? Designers
Yes,
as creators.
yes, yes, yes. So I think the point is sustainability, as you said, needs to be driven by creativity, meaning the more limits I put in my design process, that, for example, my resources need to be sustainable, respectful, and so on and so forth, the more I'm doing good design work. So I think sustainability is really needs to be seen as an opportunity to do things better, as an opportunity to, to have more constraints to solve. And I love this part of design. This is why I put myself into systemic thinking, because I thought it's a good challenge. And whatever, like, designing without thinking about these constraints is kind of cheating, or it's like styling. It's not really, it's a fashion. It's not something sustainable in terms of sustainable in the long run, economically, environmentally, in many ways, socially. So we need to be creators for sure, but we need to also imagine, as you said, like we need to imagine possibilities as a facilitator when you're guiding a client, to towards one outcome or another. You also do this process of imagination and thinking, oh, what if we do that? What if we did that? Or you think of a long-term goal and then you backcast from it and you say, well, if we want to achieve that, what shall we do now? And yeah, it's a creative process. Not everybody is well versed in the creation process, but the ones that are, it's a pity if they don't apply to these kind of things. I think this is one of the most stimulating creative processes because it's systemic, so it's exponentially more difficult.
Actually, often when I design, I even use design when I'm designing a process for a client or for a group. I'm thinking, aha, so how can I design the conditions for this to happen so that the group can get there? So I'm designing actually a container of experiences that people can go through, and I'm hypothesizing how will that make them feel, and would they reach the objective. So interesting, another parallel that I use so much design in my talk. Okay, but I have a hypothesis that even if the EU, let's say, has this enabler talking with companies, etc., I think we're dealing with a wider issue at hand, and it's the one that somehow this thinking in analytical versus systemic thinking, or thinking in consumerist, extractivist manner versus a more collaborative or more interconnected manner. I think this is the wider issue that we have at hand. And then maybe through designing certain experiences or processes or products, we can be reminded that this is going on. What do you think about this? Do you recognize this as an issue? It's the mindset of the people more than what do you think? What is the issue when we're talking about all of this?
It depends how far you want to go in back in evolution as human beings. I personally think that the Western mindset
Mm-hmm.
is a mindset of competition because of how the society is developed in this part of the world, where there were less resources. The more you go north, the less resources you have, the less food grows spontaneously. And we have a lot of peoples, and because we have had many peoples, then we had a lot of cross contamination, and we developed technologies and a combination of between the mindset of exploitation because we needed to beat the other peoples, and this idea of competition um, made us very efficient into using resources, but efficient in a sense that we are efficient only for the ones who makes the resources, not for the ones who use it or the ones who throw it away or the nature or the other species. So we've been very human focused, and we I think we are how do I say, like, we position humans above everything else, like the our mindset is we use resources, we don't collaborate with other foods and plants and animals to make our living better, but we use resources and transform it into something else. The level of technology has developed so much as well that we don't even think that those resources come from nature. Like my first design classes in university are, okay, tell me where comes from. How long is it taken for oil to form? Like which plastics you make from oil, which plastics you make from sand, and all these kind of things. Like we don't know that silicon comes from sand, and PVC comes from oil, and we don't know how many years it took it to form, and it's like 300 billion years or something like that, million years. So I think maybe through, as you said, through the product, we can be reminded of our impact, but at the same time, I think it's a broader cultural shift, and it involves, decentering the human. And I think this is a very rooted work, especially in monotheistic religions, if I may say. Like even from since then, we have kind of condensed all our awe for nature and respect for nature into one God, and it's a very human-like God. While before we had more respect for the forces of nature.
True.
So
That's very
I went
interesting.
really broad into the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for building on this. And what do you think from your work with students, with the youth council that you mentioned, which I think is also very interesting. If you can tell us a bit about it, what do you think is needed for society to make that transition happen towards a more decentralized? I like how you frame it, decentering the human, dethroning the human. What do
This
you
one in the
see?
I think what I try to convey is really a sense of curiosity towards everything else. If you're curious about the conditions that enable a frog to have, uh, I don't know the word for it, hard to have children, or like to make their eggs, to have their to make the new generations, or turtles, like some like when if you think that turtles are born male or female depending on the temperature of the sand, you understand how dangerous it is at 1 degree of warming, um, so the curiosity about everything nature, besides, we're very easily interested in the new trends in fashion, in technology, in the new intricacies of technology, but we're not interested enough in nature. And sometimes we eat food that we're not even interested in. Like, do you know that food, where it comes from? Um, what it took to grow that food? Like, what's this global supply chain? I think instilling this sense of curiosity is what really will make us change our mindset, because the moment you're interested in something and you're curious about them, then you have more respect because you learn things, and you will reframe where you stand compared to them. So I think that's mostly it. For example, in the Youth Climate Assembly Milan, I'm working on that with other colleagues through a European grant. Um, One of the things we did was show them where they stand as citizens compared to uh, the municipality, the companies, the associations, and which kind of intervention they can make, depending whether they want to tackle a product or a service or something that is private owned or public owned. So understanding the relationship with the system, I think this is empowering, and it makes them again more curious to learn more about something instead of saying, oh, the world is dying, everything is shit, and like we cannot do anything. We feel completely powerless because so many generations didn't do enough before us. So we blame you for putting us here. Okay, yes, I agree with that, but like, there's a sense of agency. And I think through curiosity and interest, you get this sense of agency.
Yeah, I noted down what you said. Earlier, you mentioned that about companies as well. Depending on how much agency they think they have, they're more likely to learn or to do something about it. So it's like, how do we switch from this victim mentality of our circumstances to a more empowered state of like, it depends on me and I can do something about it. That's very interesting and needed work that goes hand in hand with the. And I like how you say that the curiosity, instilling the curiosity, is already the first step to making a change. So you're not, so let's say I have a very, sometimes I'm like, I want people, everyone to democratize what systems thinking is, and to everyone has this ability. But actually, it's first comes the curiosity, and then maybe people will want to understand. Plus, systems thinking is nothing new. It's like we've always had this type of thinking. It's just that now we call it system or design thinking, or, but it's actually, it was always with us. So I'm taking note also of this agency, how much agency you have and how much curious you are. And then maybe going towards the end, or more towards you, what do you need as a professional working in this field? What are your challenges? What's happening in there? How can you get more support in the world?
That's really interesting. I work at the intersection of many things because I was trained a designer. I'm not really doing the designer work anymore every day. So, yeah, I still do some of my traditional designer's work, but most of the time I work with public administrations or European grants or even cooperation agencies. I work with institutions, associations. I do talks. So I I think there needs to be this role of the designer needs to be understood not only as the one that works for the company to better serve the user, but it needs to be understood, as you said, as a facilitator overall, a facilitator that, designers became very popular in consulting agencies in the 2010s. Like all the big consulting agencies bought design studios because they understood that the design thinking mindset worked to um, to upgrade the services they were providing that used to be Western centric or like identical all over the world, and instead to contextualize them more in the new territories they were serving. So basically, globalization required the facilitator's perspective to understand the new peoples, their needs. I think now we need to expand even more, to nature. So no, we need this designer work to become the facilitator of this. But the work I do feels very lonely sometimes. Like there's not a lot of people that do this, and it takes a lot of effort for me to do it because I keep pushing, certain boundaries. So I would love if there was much more recognition of this design work across the public sector, across, even at conference level, when you have big conference about, the future of our economies, you need thinkers, not only foresighters, not only tech enthusiasts, but you need this kind of more reflective role. If I may, is this other idea that I have about the world that we are very active, but we're not reflective enough. We don't allow time for reflection. and it's an imbalance between, this level of this in the Chinese world is more like the energies of like one is aggressive, active, and imposing, and the other one is passive, receiving, accepting. We need to have this kind of role of listening, even in these conferences, even in the public spaces where, well, in the public spaces there is more of this role, but not this designer mediated role that I want to talk about. I'm putting together a lot of concepts, so I'm getting lost. But my point is, yes, we need this mediator role, to not just give insights, but to listen and transform these according to the direction that we want to achieve. This enabler role needs to fit somewhere, and right now we don't have it because our society is not structured for that.
Yeah. I hear you about this. We're so focused on doing and on the out, on the yang energy and not on the yin energy, the more
Exactly. I didn't want to use.
receiving. No, but
I
it,
didn't.
it makes sense.
Yeah.
I completely understand you and I agree with you. Yeah.
Yes.
I think of them as archetypes, not gender related, but the masculine and the feminine, so the doing versus the receiving. And I'm actually now reading a book. It's about generative scribing. I don't know if you know. It's the thing that you have facilitators who are listening in the room and then they're writing on these big walls. But the idea is not to be copying what's happening in the room. So you're not visual cartooning. It's not about this. It's about literally about listening and then having a conversation with what's happening. So it's a lot about this invisible skill, or let's say in our current society, this whole amount of skills that are about listening, about enabling, like they're invisible. They're not valued. Well, they're
Yes.
essential. Yeah.
It's like care work that women have been doing for so long, and we
Yes.
need to bring this care work into the economy. I love that you were using yin and yang because I use it as well, but sometimes I'm like, maybe I'm stretching it too much. But because in the Western perspective, we don't really think in those terms. But that was part of my education in Shanghai, shaping the way I think.
Uh,
Um, yeah, to think that really we need more of this accepting energy to become part of the workforce, and to create the connections, the synergies that make a system basically. Instead we have designed a world of analytical thinking, whether like I act and he acts upon me and they act upon this, and it's a chain of action, but there's never like a recollection of these energies. The circular economy is the same thing. The circular economy is linking back the flows. So yeah, it's basically what
Yes,
you said.
it's
You
the
summarized
it's the
it.
life force energy versus the death force energy in the circular economy, and you need both. You cannot focus only on the light and be like forever grow, grow, grow. Nothing in nature grows always. Like there is
Yes,
something grows, then
the tree
dies,
stops
then
and then it nurtures somebody else. The
yeah.
crystal, the tree is growing whenever it reaches optimal size. So this is what we need to implement right now.
Yeah, I agree. And more to welcome also this death energy of like hospicing, there's this book I really like, Hospicing Modernity. Like what is needed in the world to, okay, acknowledge modernity brought us so many things and without a doubt made the overall population perhaps richer, whatever that means, and eradicated certain sicknesses, etc. But I think there are certain things in modernity that slowly we need to phase out, such as fossil fuel and other, because they're killing us. Yeah, I don't understand.
Yeah, and
But
growth is dying as well. Like if we need to accept that economies stop growing, that population stop growing, that sometimes you don't have a high natality anymore in a like demographic decrease. Sometimes it's not a matter of judging the situation and over analyzing the situation. It's about listening and accepting and understanding that maybe this is what nature is mandating for us at the moment, because maybe if we see ourselves from the outside, maybe we are the invasive species that nature is trying to control. So then, okay, what we do with that? Like now that we know that, how do we design so that there's migrating people because of climate collapses, and there's like demographics that are decreasing, and can we match this? Can we accept nature and move on with what we read from nature, instead of just deciding that that cannot happen, or that this is the direction to follow? Like we're not listening.
we try to be in control in a situation that's ultimately beyond our control, and we're acting as if we can fix it, like, oh, let's fix it, like, let's, and utilizing so much power in fixing something that's coming from a place of denial, instead of I love this about design, that it's working with what is here right now, what are the
Yeah,
resources that are available right now for you. Okay, I got very passionate towards the end. Yeah. Um, I would like to end on a like a positive, or positive, what does it mean? But like a
Mhm.
dream like note. If you could dream about any client or situation that you would like to work in, what would that be? What are your ideal circumstances or a dream like?
I have it already.
Yeah,
Um,
go for it.
I think, um, traveling brings us to like traveling. Yeah, it has an impact on the climate, but at the same time, traveling really shows you from the outside, and then you learn things exponentially faster when you travel. You if you listen, if you want to listen, and if you don't just go there to have fun, you learn a lot. So I visited islands recently, or like places where I thought like they have so much, and if they weren't chasing the Western perspective, the Western gaze, or like the our way of doing things, they could be doing so much. Because, for example, in tropical places, you have a lot of agricultural waste, and that thing can become a new economy on its own, or in islands you can create circular economies of water. You can reforest the land. You can really bring a lot of ideas in to improve what has been rooted in maybe centuries of neglect, post colonization, and kind of misalignment, with tradition. And I would love to work on an island and to create a circular system, and say, okay, this works. It's like it's a small representation of the rest of the world, and it grows and it grows. And I say an island because I think islands are places where the boundaries are just natural boundaries. Like, this is the nature that you have to work with. Well, when you work with nations and governments, the boundaries are man-made. We design the boundaries of a country, and the frontiers and everything, and this is unnatural. So for me, it feels more, it makes more sense to work with something that is, mandated by nature rather than by humans. um it's a more complete challenge. I don't know.
Sounds beautiful. It really reminds me of this: creativity thrives on restrictions. Like
Yeah,
the more clearer the boundaries are, then the more creative you can be because it's very clear.
exactly.
Oh, okay. I wish you, if this podcast was a Aladdin's lamp, the one that you make a wish, I wish that this happens for you. And thank you so much for your time and for this beautiful conversation.
Thank you so much for the lovely conversation. I felt there were so many points of contact between what I was saying and what you were saying.
Yeah, maybe this is just the beginning. Maybe there will be a vol too.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you.
you.